Welcome to the final week of the live Health New England, Where Your Health Matters webinar series. Thank you to Katie, Maria, and Julia for making this happen and helping each of us better ourselves. My name is Mike Govin. I'm the existing business sales manager at Health New England, and we're excited to talk to you today about why food and immunity matter at a time when we're trying to avoid sickness and stay at our best. Thanks for being here with us. Our mission at Health New England is to improve the health and lives of people in our communities, which is why we have shared this series with you on ways to stay healthy during the pandemic. All webinars in this series are recorded and can be found at our Health New England YouTube page shortly after the live presentation. You'll receive a follow-up email with the YouTube and survey links. We will also post the survey link in the chat at the end of today's presentation. Your feedback is important to us, so thank you for taking the time to complete it. I'm excited to introduce today's presenter, Nancy Dell. Nancy is a registered dietitian and owner of the private practice, Nancy Dell & Associates in Western Massachusetts. You may recognize her from WWLP's Food for Thought Nutrition News segments. Nancy received her bachelor's degree in biology from Westfield State and her master's degree in human nutrition from the University of Massachusetts. She has worked with famous athletes, celebrity chefs, and local businesses, including MassMutual and Yankee Candle, to improve people's eating habits. The first year that the Massachusetts Department of Public Health awarded the Excellence in Nutrition Education Award, Nancy was an honored recipient. Today, she will talk to you about your immune system and how it can fight foreign invaders like viruses, bad bacteria, and toxins. The food we put in our mouths can affect our body's immunity, help you win and fight the fight towards optimal health, and improve your quality of life. If you do have a question you'd like answered at the end of the presentation, please enter it in the Q&A and not in the chat. You can also ask a question anonymously if you prefer. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and please welcome Nancy Dell.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Health New England, for having me. So obviously, we are all concerned about protecting ourselves from COVID-19 and its variants. And while we can talk a lot about immunity, we decided that it's appropriate to really focus on COVID-19 because to talk about all types of things would take way too long for us. So even Mona Lisa and Kermit and the mannequins in the window, we're all concerned about protecting ourselves from COVID-19. And if you come in contact with the virus, how sick you get depends on many factors, including how well nourished you are. So hence the topic for today. So why are some people hospitalized when they have COVID-19, when they test positive, and others have no symptoms? You know, most of us have heard stories where people have different reactions. My sister-in-law was so sick for 10 days, and then nobody else in her whole family even ever tested positive. The 90-year-old mother of my roommate who was in a rehab, she tested positive and she never developed any symptoms. So as we discuss some of the possible reactions, you know, we'll see, as we discuss some of the possible reasons, we'll see that people have different reactions and look at some of the different studies for that. So, okay, so there are dozens of studies underway and many studies have been completed to look at the role of nutrition, and they're trying to answer the questions. You know, do nutrients and a person's nutritional status help ward off infections of the SARS-CoV-2? That's the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. And could improving our nutritional status help treat the disease by reducing the dangerous inflammation that it causes in the lungs? It's a respiratory disease, a respiratory infection. And, so the lungs are one of our major concerns. And, many studies have some promising results. And this is a little picture you've all seen on the news 100 times of what COVID-19 looks like. So these are our objectives for today. At the end of today's seminar, you will understand how the immune system works to protect against viruses and other invaders. You will learn 4 nutrients and their food sources that science shows can optimize your immune system. And then we're going to have you plan changes in your own diet to improve your body's immunity and the ability to fight off invaders, COVID-19, as well as other things in addition to COVID-19. And I want to stress that I say optimize your immune system. You know, you can get too much of a nutrient And I compare it to fertilizing your lawn, okay? If you don't fertilize your lawn, it's not gonna look so good. If you put too much fertilizer on your lawn, it's going to kill it. So, you can't get too much of a nutrient. And we can overstimulate our immune system, which will cause autoimmune diseases. So we're just looking for that optimal. Another nice comparison about getting too much of a nutrient would be thinking about how well your car functions with 4 wheels. Okay, works great. But add a 5th wheel, it doesn't make it any better. In fact, it could actually mess things up. So we're just looking for that good balance. So that you can apply the information we discussed today and make it really useful for you, I would like you to take just 1 minute. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to write down what you had for your last 3 meals and your snacks. Okay, your breakfast today, lunch that you have planned for today, or maybe what you had yesterday, dinner, any snacks, only you're going to see it, obviously, because we're virtual anyways. But so be honest. And if you can't remember, just write down your favorite meals, like what's your favorite breakfast, your favorite lunch, your favorite dinner. It's not a test of your memory, so do the best you can. And I'm just going to give you 1 minute to do that. A minute seems like a long time when there's silence. You have 30 seconds left. Ten seconds. All right, so set that aside, and you will be referring back to that as we go through some of the nutrients that we want to focus on. So first, let's take a closer look at immunity and your immune system. We hear this all the time, but what's a simple way of understanding what it is? So the immune system is like the military for your body. It's made up of a complex network of cells and proteins that defends your body against infection. It keeps a record of every pathogen, virus, bacteria that it's ever encountered. So it has a great memory, and it wants to recognize it, and it actually wants to kill it when it enters the body again. So it's basically your Army, your Navy, your Air Force. It's ready to go into battle when danger enters your body. So let's take a look at a simple video. It's a little less than 2 minutes to help you understand how your immune system works. All right, so you need the healthy immune system. And how does it get healthy? Obviously, the food you eat helps to feed your immune system. And a deficiency in just one of many essential nutrients that we need can reduce your body's immune system optimal function. Okay, all those nutrients work as a team. Okay, but again, not too much. You can over fertilize your lawn, just enough. So the first nutrient we're going to look at is vitamin D. vitamin D deficiency goes way beyond rickets. A 2019 review of existing clinical trials indicated that vitamin D supplements can reduce the severity of an acute respiratory tract infection in patients that were in the hospital. And they generally used about 1,500 to 2,000 IUs a day of vitamin D. And we found that reduced colds 40%. So researchers decided to look at vitamin D in COVID patients. And here's the scientific evidence, what they found. So research shows that you're twice as likely to test positive for COVID-19 if you are vitamin D deficient. Over 80% of COVID patients have a vitamin D deficiency. Fascinating. Vitamin D deficiency may contribute to the high mortality of older adults during the COVID-19 pandemic, and adequate vitamin D reduced the risk of dying 50% in people over 40 years old, and that's the risk of dying from COVID-19. And here's a treatment study. So that was kind of preventative, that research I just presented to you, but this is a treatment study using vitamin D. So patients that had COVID and were in the hospital, okay, and this is a small study, but among the 26 people who did not get vitamin D, 50% died. 50% ended up in the ICU and 2 died. But among the 50 people who did get vitamin D as treatment, only 1 person went to the ICU and none died. So vitamin D clearly plays a role here. So how does vitamin D work in helping COVID-19 not make us sick? So when the virus enters your body, it wants to attach and replicate to cells. It wants to attach to cells and to replicate. So vitamin D will inform the immune cells in your body. There's a virus in here. Come on, I need you to go there and destroy it. So then it interferes with 70% of COVID-19 proteins. So these little spikes here on COVID-19, those little red spikes, those are proteins. And vitamin D can interfere with 70% of those proteins, stopping COVID and other viruses from surviving. And it also vitamin D helps avoid the inflammation that causes fluid in the lungs and the need for a ventilator. In simple terms, think that the cell has a lock. And these little protein spikes on the virus are like a key, and it wants to get into the lock and open up the cell and get in. But vitamin D puts glue in that lock. So you try to put the key in there and you can't open it up. So the NIH says 35% of adults in the US are vitamin D deficient. Actually, it's pretty high in New England because we don't get a lot of sunshine in the winter. The numbers are higher in African Americans, Hispanics, the obese, and the elderly. In fact, 61% of elderly will have a vitamin D deficiency. And these people are more likely to also test positive for COVID-19. And our goal is to have our blood level of vitamin D at least 30 nanograms per deciliter to decrease respiratory infections. And it is more common now that doctors will test for vitamin D. If you have not had a vitamin D test, you would ask your physician to do one for you. So how much vitamin D do we need a day? So these numbers are really higher than what's the daily value. These numbers are from Dr. Hollick at Boston University, based on really optimal immunity. So for infants, there's 400 to 1,000 IUs of vitamin D needed. Children, 600 to 1,000 IUs. Adults need 1,500 to 2,000 IUs. If you are obese or have dark skin, you need 3,000 to 5,000 IUs. So darker skin makes less vitamin D, hence you have a higher need. And also obese people need more because vitamin D gets stored in the body fat. So when that happens, it's not circulating through the body where it needs to be to do its work to get to the virus and deactivate it. So where do we get our vitamin D from? Most of you may know that we get it from sunshine. Okay, it's made when the sun hits our skin, and we need about 20 minutes per day of exposed skin to the sun without sunscreen. And if you live above Atlanta, where we are, you cannot make vitamin D from November to April because the angle of the sun's rays is such that it just doesn't make vitamin D. So it'd be nice if we could all go to Florida for the winter and get our vitamin D made, but that's obviously not possible. So let's look at some food sources of vitamin D. So after sunlight, cod liver oil is our highest source. We don't recommend cod liver oil because our liver has it detoxifies chemicals. So taking cod liver oil could possibly have some toxins in it. So we don't like to recommend cod liver oil. But otherwise, you'll see some other fishes are pretty high. So you have salmon as a good source, mackerel, tuna. Again, you need to be a little careful of tuna. It is a large fish. It could also have some mercury in it. The CDC recommends that we limit tuna to no more than 6 ounces per week. And then sardines can be a good source. And then you get into, it says raw milk, but any milk is good. It's not that the milk naturally has vitamin D, but we add about 1,000 IUs to milk. And then your eggs will be a good source, caviar, which most of us, again, don't eat, but mushrooms can also be a good source. So this is just to tell you that wild salmon and eggs from pasture-raised chickens can have 4 times the vitamin D because they get more sun exposure. This just happens to be my daughter-in-law, Stacy. She has, I think right now, last I knew they were at 60 chickens and then they hatched another 20. So they have like 80 chickens. And if you see those eggs, they have such dark orange yolks. They're beautiful. And they'll have more vitamin D, 4 times as much than an egg you might buy in the grocery store. So more and more people with the pandemic have actually been getting their own chickens. So you may see roadside stands where you can buy pasture-raised chickens locally. Mushrooms were mentioned on the list for making vitamin D. Mushrooms can make vitamin D from the sun like we do. Isn't that bizarre? But even after you buy mushrooms, you can leave them in the sun for 15 minutes and they will make 200 to 800 IUs of vitamin D. So if you can't eat enough vitamin D and you can't get enough sunshine like we can't in New England from November to April, you will need to supplement. So for low vitamin D, this little comic says I'd recommend supplements, but not sunshine for a snowman, and for us, supplements probably in the winter. So how much do you need in a supplement? Well, ideally, you get your blood level of vitamin D tested. And for you need 100 IUs for every point that you're below 30. So let's say you get your blood level tested and it's 10. Okay, you're 20 points below 30. So 20 times 100 is 2,000. So you basically just add 2 zeros to how much that will take you to that 30. So again, if you haven't been tested, have your doctor check for you. So vitamin D supplements, there are some very specific guidelines if you're going to take vitamin D. You want it to be vitamin D3 and ideally in a gel cap versus a hard pill. Why? Because the gel cap, that's actually fat, and vitamin D is a fat soluble nutrient. So you need to have some fat to absorb it. Even if it's in a gel cap, you should take it with a meal that has fat, you will get more absorption. But if it is in a hard tablet, then definitely make sure you're taking it with some fat. And then you get 57% absorption with your largest meal, which is usually dinner. And again, that's because that largest meal is going to usually be higher in fat. So let's look back at the food record you put down and look at a checklist. So number 1, do you know your blood level of vitamin D? If not, you want to be tested. Look at your food record. You know, maybe you haven't done it in the past day, but do you generally eat some salmon or egg yolks or mushrooms or any of the other vitamin D foods that were on the list on a regular basis? And if not, do you take your vitamin D supplement? Do you take it with fat? And is the dose high enough? The more yeses you have, obviously, the better. And remember, I want to always stress that this does not replace the vaccine. It will boost your immunity, but it does not replace the vaccine. So if you have any questions about vitamin D, you can submit them and we'll answer those at the end of the session. So let's take a look at zinc. So why are we looking at zinc? Colds are respiratory illnesses, and so is coronavirus. So researchers took a closer look at zinc status in COVID patients. And we know that oral zinc supplements might benefit people with low levels of zinc, according to the Mayo Clinic. And if it's taken soon after a cold, or after cold symptoms appear, zinc can shorten the length of a cold. So they looked at zinc, and here's the scientific evidence they found. People who died of COVID-19 had lower levels of zinc in their blood than those who survived the illness. Lower zinc levels correlated with higher inflammation in the course of the infection and poorer outcomes. And we'll talk about the inflammation more later on, but the inflammation is a big problem with complications from COVID-19. And overall, after adjusting for factors like age and gender and other treatments that were received, every unit increase of zinc in the blood was tied to a 7% lower chance that the patient would die while in the hospital. So zinc obviously plays some role, and we need to look at it more closely. But NIH says that people who are at higher risk for zinc deficiency are also at higher risk for severe COVID-19. Those are the elderly, the people that are immune deficient, obese people, diabetics, and people with heart disease. So let's just take a closer look at who else is at low as a risk for having low zinc. So vegetarians may just not eat enough zinc. People who consume too much alcohol have a problem because alcohol reduces the absorption of zinc. And as we get older, we absorb and eat less zinc foods anyways. So elderly have a higher risk. And in general, only 12% of the population, 1 in 9 people, is zinc deficient, but 40% of elderly may be zinc deficient. And in the developing world, not in the US, but in the developing world, zinc deficiency is really quite common. So how does zinc work? So zinc works in a couple different ways. So they can prevent lung injury from the ventilator. It can reduce inflammation. It improves your immunity against viruses, and it improves what we call mucociliary clearance. That's those little hairs in your lung that pushes out the mucus, okay? Like this little comic shows us, okay? You know, get off, you tiny, annoying microbes, and the little hairs that on the top here will push out those viruses. So how much zinc do you need? Generally 8 milligrams for women and 11 milligrams for men. And here are our most common zinc foods. So you'll see they are mostly protein foods. Oysters are a great source, but you know, beef, chicken legs, the darker meat has a little bit more zinc, but in general, your protein foods are good. Tofu, it doesn't have to be firm. All tofu is good if you're a vegetarian. Pork chops, hemp seeds, again, a good source for vegetarians that are out there, and as well as lentils and low-fat yogurt. You have some in oatmeal, and also back to those mushrooms, but shiitake mushrooms will give you a good source of zinc as well. So let's take a look at your zinc status, because zinc is distributed in trace amounts among cells. It makes it difficult to test. Like you can't do a simple blood test to say, oh, what's my zinc status? You know, we can check some zinc deficiency through blood plasma, but it's more complicated. Some of the symptoms of low zinc are pretty generic. It's loss of appetite, being irritable, hair loss, rough and dry skin, slow wound healing, a poor sense of taste and smell, diarrhea, nausea. Those are things that can be symptoms of other, you know, disorders as well. But here are some questions to answer, to ask yourself and kind of get a better guideline if you could possibly be zinc deficient. Am I over age 65? Am I immune compromised? Do you have cancer, hepatitis, AIDS, any autoimmune disorders? Am I obese? Am I diabetic? Do I have heart disease? Am I a vegetarian? And do I drink too much alcohol? Too much alcohol is now defined as more than one alcoholic beverage a day. And you can't save them all up for Friday night. So the more yeses you have here, the more you may need to focus on getting zinc foods. And again, you can always take a multivitamin, multi-mineral that has 100% of the daily value for zinc. It's just kind of an insurance policy. So that concludes our topic on zinc. Let's take a look at a plant pigment called quercetin. This is a plant pigment that can have some benefit for airway infections. Again, COVID-19 is an airway infection, but it can even help with colds, the common cold. It interferes with the virus in many different ways, which we will look at. But just to define kind of what a plant pigment is for you, you've probably heard of beta carotene that makes carrots orange. That is a plant pigment. Lycopene is the plant pigment that makes a tomato red. So quercetin is just a plant pigment. So here's the scientific evidence that we'll look at. There are 6 steps in which the virus kind of attacks your body. And quercetin can help stop the virus at some of these different steps. But again, not a replacement for the vaccine. It just also may account for the differences in how sick you get. Someone who doesn't eat a lot of quercetin foods is going to get more sick than people who do eat foods high in quercetin, which we'll look at in a second. So the NIH says that initial studies show quercetin can interfere with 85% of the COVID's viral proteins. Again, those little spikes, which are the keys to get into the cell. So if 85% of those keys aren't working, it's going to, obviously have lower level of infection. But the research on the quercetin is ongoing. So here's the 6 steps in the virus's cycle, okay? And so the virus enters through your nose, mouth, and throat. That's why we can test for COVID-19 that way. It wants to attach to the cell, put that key in, enter your cell. It wants to replicate, make a new virus, transfer like the information on how to reproduce, and then get released into your body and make more viruses. But here is a nice little video again on how the virus works. Okay, so getting back, remember that quercetin can help at step 1, where it attaches, where the virus wants to attach to the cell. And basically, like vitamin D, it puts glue in that lock so it can't attach. Okay, so do you eat quercetin foods? We want you to look at your food diary again and realize that in this fancy little graph, they're looking at 100 grams of food, which is between a half a cup to 1 cup of the food. So you see elderberries, red onions, white onions, cranberries are good sources, green hot peppers, kale, blueberries, red apples are good. And the color actually does play a role because remember, this is a plant pigment. So red apples may be good and green apples may not be as good. Romaine lettuce, pears, and spinach are all good sources of quercetin. So look at your food record and see on a regular basis, are you eating some of these foods? And on the side, I added 2 other good foods. A cup of green tea has 1.2 milligrams of quercetin, and 1 cup of coffee has 0.8 milligrams of quercetin. How much we need each day, there's really no recommended daily value set. Something that researchers are working on to see what's an optimal amount. Okay, so let's look at the next issue I want to discuss is maintaining a healthy body fat. Obviously, we know that's easier said than done. A little comic relief here. This woman says, it took a lot of willpower, but finally, I gave up dieting, okay? So nearly 72% of Americans over age 20 are either overweight or obese. And clearly, managing weight is easier said than done, but we have seen that COVID-19 has motivated a lot of our clients to lose weight because it is one of the risk factors. So obesity is linked to lower immunity. And specifically for COVID-19, we see that obesity increases the risk of severe illness from COVID-19. And people who are overweight may also be at increased risk. It triples the risk of hospitalization. It decreases the lung capacity, so it can make ventilation more difficult. And we're going to look at a short video on that soon. And then as your BMI increases, the risk of death from COVID-19 also increases. And possibly you may get a lower vaccine response for numerous diseases if you're obese. So here's a nice news clip that I'd like to look at that will explain how obesity increases the complications of COVID-19.
Nancy, sorry, if there's supposed to be sound, we don't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear the sound? There is sound. How about now?
No.
Can you hear it?
No.
Okay, I don't know why. All right, we'll skip it then. Okay, sorry. I heard that you couldn't hear the sound. I'm not sure why, and I'm technology challenged. So basically what it shows with the obesity, that if you have especially abdominal fat, it's pushing up against your lungs. All right, and remember, we're talking about a respiratory illness. So you're having more trouble getting good breath, your lungs are compromised, and you're going to be at greater risk for ventilation and then, the overall respiratory infection when your lungs are compromised. So that actually, you can probably Google that video. It was from News 6, an ABC station. So you could maybe try to find it, but that's basically what it says. So again, a little comic relief. It says, I have tons of willpower, but really what I need is won't power. All right, so, weight management itself is several webinars, but I just want to stress that weight management is really 10% about food. The easy part is explaining the foods and other physical and environmental factors that make weight loss easier. The part that we work on the most is all the obstacles that keep you from doing what you need to do. You need to learn how to manage hunger, and if you're eat because you're angry, eat because you're lonely or lazy, eat because, you don't have time, or you're tired, or there are too many temptations around, or stress eating, which of course can happen in this crazy world right now, as well as social environments and self-talk. So in order to do that, you certainly have an option to team up with a registered dietitian. In my experience, most RDs know the struggles. They've often become interested in nutrition because they have had their own struggles with food. And telehealth certainly makes it easier at this point because, it's just a phone call away to get health, or a video call away to get health. We have found our patients can check in more often and do better. And also, I wanted to mention that Health New England's series in this webinar, the number 3 was on developing healthy habits. Very good if you're having a lot of challenges with your food. That was an excellent, excellent webinar. But, working with someone, you can, it's a coach to help you find easy adjustments that fit your lifestyle, teach you the skills to overcome the obstacles. Most insurances cover, and, telehealth, again, makes it easy. More comic relief, the veterinarian diet, wearing the dog collar, is the latest thing according to this comic. So the last nutrient I want to briefly touch on is vitamin C. There are no direct studies with vitamin C and COVID, but we know vitamin C supports the immune system. It covers the cell and protects it from invaders like viruses. Less than 10% of Americans get optimal vitamin C. So optimal isn't necessarily, the RDI, but RDI is 90 milligrams for men. That's the recommended daily intake. And for women, it's 75 milligrams, but more may be optimal when it comes to preventing respiratory illness. So do you get enough vitamin C a day? Here are some foods. And again, you can look at your food record. So this again is for 100-gram portions, which is generally about a half a cup to 1 cup of the food. So we always think of oranges, but look at all the foods below that are higher than oranges. You have pineapple and cauliflower and strawberries, papaya, green pepper, broccoli, kale, red pepper, guava. So many good sources of vitamin C, and you can look to see in your food record if you're getting enough or not. So let's put this all together. Okay, so does your plate when you sit down to a meal look like this? All right, and I've kind of bulleted each of these because what I want you to do is set one goal to get you started. So one thing you can do is make half your plate fruits and vegetables. You'll get your quercetin and your vitamin C if you're getting half fruits and vegetables. And make a quarter of your plate protein. That's your lean meat, fish, poultry, beans, nuts, seeds. These are all good sources of zinc. You want to maintain a healthy body composition, and certainly a plate that looks like this will get you eating more healthfully. You want to get adequate vitamin D, and here in New England, that might mean a supplement from November to April 1st. And you could consider a multivitamin, multi-mineral supplement. You always hear mixed reports on, should I take a multivitamin, multi-mineral? So Tufts University decided to take a closer look at those studies that were kind of conflicting. And what they found was in studies on multivitamins and minerals, they were including people that take a multivitamin as little as 5 times a month. And what they found was if people took the multivitamin mineral at least 21 days a month, they did have better immunity and had less illness. So the big thing is you have to remember to take it. And nothing with big doses, just, something basic with 100% or so of even less of what is the daily value listed on the label. So ending on a fun note, remember, it's in your hands, okay? This woman says, I've got to start taking care of myself. Whoever was supposed to be doing it has done a really crappy job. So it's really in your hands. And, have a lot of people out there, including all the people at Health New England, all the people who gave webinars today out there to help you. So thank you for having me, and we'll take a look at questions, Julia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy. I really like that tip about keeping the mushrooms in the sun.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. I'll put my mushrooms in the sun for like 15 minutes, before I cook them.
That's awesome. Yeah, we do have some questions. I'm gonna just actually weed out some that you might have answered since they asked them.
Sure.
There's one question that says, awesome info. Once we start increasing dietary and supplement sources of D, zinc, etc., how long does it take for our bodies to increase the D and zinc, assuming properly dosed? Are we looking at a month, 6 months to get to the right levels in our body?
Okay. So it really can depend obviously on how low you are. It can be depend on your physical status as well, because obviously the more body fat you have, the less is going to be circulating in your blood to do the fight. So what I would recommend is when you start like a vitamin D supplement, that your doctor check in 3 months to see, is it climbing? You know, you want to make sure it's climbing and you're absorbing it well and using it. So you can't really give a answer saying, oh, after a month, you're going to be good. It really depends on so many other factors. You know, the more fat you have in your meal, the more you're going to absorb. So it's hard to say, but I would have your doctor check your blood level of vitamin D in 3 months. With zinc, again, no real studies to see, well, you know, can we say how long it takes to get up to optimal? Hard to say, but, you know, you're going to see a difference in terms of what's circulating in your system, you know, right away. So you're going to get some protection immediately. But optimal, hard to say how long it's going to be to get optimal.
Sure. Is there vitamin D in an egg white? I do not eat the yolks.
No, only in the yolks. Okay. Again, you're going to find it where it's dissolved in fat, and the fat is in the yolk. So it's fine to not have the yolk, but you have other sources of vitamin D or take the supplement.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if a multivitamin is really necessary if you eat a well-rounded diet. I dislike taking vitamins, but feel like each time I see my doctor, they always want me to be taking a multivitamin. Thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah. So well-rounded diet, again, is kind of like open to interpretation. Part of the problem is that we can't eat enough calories always to get all the nutrients we need, because we're not out like hoeing fields 8 hours a day like our ancestors did. And, you know, we're sitting at a computer and we're talking, you know, and I mean, I don't even get up now to go and get a patient, you know, so I have fewer steps and have to think about getting more exercise, which would mean I can have more food, which means I can get more nutrients. So in general, if we go by that tough study, they have found that in today's environment, many people can't eat enough food, can't afford the calories to eat enough food to get optimal levels of nutrients, and a basic multivitamin, multi-mineral taken at least 21 days a month, you know, will give you some protection.
Great. We'll do one more question. I take zinc daily, but have a metallic taste in my mouth. Is this from the zinc?
You know, I don't really know if that could be one of the side effects of it. If you're taking, I mean, zinc does affect your taste buds. It could be one of those situations with the, you know, fertilizing lawn, too much, too little. I'd like to know like what your dose might be that you're taking. I wouldn't take more than 100% of the daily value. But, you know, people who lose their sense of taste are often zinc deficient. So if I just think common sense wise, getting too much can still affect your taste buds. So it's possible. I'd have to kind of research it to get an answer, and you're welcome to give me a call and give your name and I can get back to you on that. But it's possible, because if I just think logically, it's something that if I was getting my PhD, I might want to research, but I don't know if there is an answer out there. But like I said, zinc affects taste buds, so it could be a possibility, and only take 100% of the daily value or less if you're eating the foods that contain it too.
Okay. There are some other questions, but we have run out of time. So thank you everyone for asking them, but Nancy's number is on the screen. So if you'd like to reach out, feel free to do that. Thank you so much for your time, Nancy. We really appreciate it. Excellent, excellent information.
Thank you. It was fun. I miss seeing everybody, but it was still fun.
Yeah, yeah. So it's bittersweet to say thank you to everyone who is attending and who has attended in the last 6 weeks from the Health Management Department. Thank you for attending. You will receive, there's a survey in the chat, so please take that. You will receive an email as usual with the YouTube link and the chat link. Our Health New England YouTube channel has all the webinars from the past, so you can take a look at those there as well. So also be on the lookout for an email next week, as we're going to send you a survey looking at an evaluation of the entire series to see if there's a desire or a need for a second session. So our goal was to educate, engage, and empower this Health New England community, and we hope that we did that so that you can decrease stress, improve your life, and maybe even thrive during this COVID period. So thank you all. Thank you, Nancy, again, and have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Bye.